Bienvenue and welcome to the Open Compute European Summit. Please welcome Executive Director, Open Compute Project Foundation, Cole Crawford.
Good morning. Thank you guys for coming. Yesterday I was backstage after the morning keynotes, and somebody on Twitter said, why not Welsh? So croeso, if you are here and you speak Welsh. Welcome to day 2 for the Open Compute European Summit. It's very nice to be here. We have 3 amazing speakers lined up for you in the morning, and then some great speakers in the afternoon. I'd like to think that what Open Compute is doing is transforming an industry. I think that what we're offering to the community and what the community is taking from Open Compute is really transforming the way that solution providers and OEMs and ODMs are interacting with consumers. And I think transformative things like this come along not so often, though it seems that in the last couple years we've seen some other great projects that are coming along and really driving these types of changes. And so my first speaker this morning is no stranger to transforming industries. He's transformed the Linux industry, he's transformed the OpenStack industry, and now he's helping us transform this industry. My speaker this morning is the founder of Canonical and Ubuntu. Please help me welcome Mark Shuttleworth.
Hello, good morning. It is such a great pleasure to be here. Because I feel like I'm surrounded by people who actually appreciate metal. There's something profoundly authentic and potent about bare metal. Some things just demand to be, on the tin. And I think this community is one that really enjoys that and is passionate about the next era, the next iteration, the next generation of bare metal. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about bare metal magic, what it's going to be like, what it is like when you truly master metal and how that transforms your business. Cole told me we'd have two separate audiences here today. We'd have members of the OCP community, passionate visionaries, designers, people who are looking at the next generation of systems and bringing openness to that industry. And then we'd also have folks here who are consumers of OCP equipment, who want to reap the benefits of scale thinking. And I hope I have something for both of you on the vendor side, on the industry side. I hope that you'll see a path forward towards moving beyond the metal into the workloads and the solutions. And on the on the consumer side of it, I hope that you'll get a sense of what's happening in the field of operations as people embrace new ways of working, new ways of operating in the modern era. So we're in the middle of this industrial evolution. And what I love about OCP is that it's one of the very rare cases where that evolution hasn't been prompted first by a dominant industry player, with everybody else then responding to that. In fact, we've seen real leadership, and I want to credit Facebook and others with the vision for creating OCP. And also say to enterprises in particular that if you really want to reap the rewards of what is happening here at OCP, you need to look both to participate and also to support the organization, to create this next wave of technology, of standardization. Is going to take deep resources. It's going to take focused, concentrated, long-term effort. And so I hope that you'll join me in supporting the institution to make sure that it has the capacity to do an awesome, awesome job of that. I'm speaking to you today in my capacity as founder of Ubuntu. And Ubuntu was not the first enterprise Linux, but it is by far the leading enterprise Linux for scale and scale-out workloads. And to put some numbers behind that, if you look across the public cloud, 65% of the workloads running on the public cloud today are on Ubuntu. And it doesn't matter if they're workloads that belong to banks or pharmaceutical companies or media companies or startups of any size or description. Ubuntu is hugely prevalent there. If you look at private clouds, Ubuntu is the reference platform for OpenStack, which is probably the leading forum for talking about private clouds. And as a result, most of the OpenStack vendors will be happy to deliver you an OpenStack private cloud or their solution, whatever it is, on Ubuntu. And the majority of the OpenStack deployments are on Ubuntu as well, especially if you look at the very large ones. Something like 80% of the largest OpenStack deployments are on Ubuntu. If you move up the stack to PaaS, many of the leading PaaSes, Heroku has been open about using Ubuntu very heavily. And of course, the open source PaaSes, most of them are built on Ubuntu, most notably Cloud Foundry, which we think is the leading open source PaaS. And some of the big brand names are also on Ubuntu, but they've been more confidential about their choices. And lastly, if you look at, for example, the Docker revolution, which is a really important part of the way people are starting to think about building these scale-out kinds of systems, there are 6 times as many Docker images on Ubuntu as there are on the next platform in the list. So we really engage very deeply with the developers and the architects of scale-out systems. And I don't say any of this to boast, because I think we're just at the beginning of the revolution and things could go in any direction. We have to pedal very fast to stay ahead of the curve. But really it's because I think we have something in common. I have a real passion for distributed scale-out systems. And I think if you're a vendor here today, you are also passionate about scale, because scale is where the volume is, scale is where the industry is headed. And if you're an enterprise here today, you're probably also thinking about how you draw the benefits of scale thinking into your business. So scale and scale out are what we have in common. So with that introduction, let me dive into some bare metal magic. I have here a set of orange boxes, and in each of these orange boxes there are 10 Intel microservers. And we're going to use that to kind of role play the experiences that people are starting to want and to have with OCP hardware, and people who are thinking about scale and bulk. So imagine you've just taken delivery of your first rack of OCP hardware. What might you want to do with it? You might want to install operating systems. So right over here, I've got 10 nodes. I'm going to take the first one, and let's install an operating system. Now, being a hardcore Linux nerd, the most exciting thing I thought I could show you was a fully automated remote install of Windows, which is still the #1 operating system for enterprise bare metal deployments. And for me, it's really quite exciting to see this work. So I'm just going to go and switch to Windows, and let's see, we've got Windows Hyper-V Server 2012 R2. I guess that's better than R1. Let's save that, and let's go kick it off. So hopefully in a couple of minutes, you'll see Windows appear magically. There was nothing there, no operating system. We're just remotely controlling and installing operating systems. And the software that's driving that, this software here, is software that we develop in collaboration with many OCP vendors, and it is being used as part of the OCP validation, verification, certification process. So everything you see here will work with OCP. There's a perfect fit between the thinking in this software, which we call MAS, Metal as a Service, and the vision and the principles behind OCP. Obviously, we can also do Linux, so I can give you a choice of flavors. We can do RHEL, CentOS, SUSE, obviously Ubuntu. Let's do CentOS. And fire that up. So again, you should see CentOS starting to install there. And so just in a matter of minutes, you've got operating systems up and running on your brand new OCP rack. But that's not all that you need to be able to do. So what MAS will do is take care of all of the administrative work, so BMC credential management, commissioning machines, which you can extend with your own scripts, because you need to be able to customize the way that hardware is configured for your workloads and in your environment to meet your compliance requirements. And of course, it'll do a full hardware inventory as well. So just by pixie booting machines on the network, that as they arrive, magically they go into the database, and you're now able to consume and harness that resource almost as if it was a cloud. So that's the origin of the name Metal as a Service. Okay, so that's our way of helping to bring the key values of scale out into the OCP environment. When I talk to people about OCP, they say that their keen interest is to acquire some of the insights and the benefits of the scale at which the huge mega data center operators work into their own businesses. And many people focus in that conversation on hardware and the cost of acquisition of the hardware. And I think that is important. There are benefits to be had when you start thinking about hardware as a bulk commodity rather than as single precious nodes. But you also know that the hardware industry is enormously pressured from a margin point of view. And so at some level, I think we all understand that the benefits there, while important, are only the first step. Now, if I look at the big operators, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons, and the Microsofts, they do two things. First, they do this extraordinary design process on their hardware. But second, they also automate all of their operations. And the key metric, I think, is this one. Measure the number of humans that are administrating a given number of services. And this is where you see the real difference between traditional IT operations and the real masters of the craft, right? And this is where, if you look at the potential benefits to traditional enterprises, this is, I think, where many of the biggest benefits lie. So, yes, you could get 5 to 10% if you focus on this next wave of hardware, possibly more if the architectures really start to shift and the way those systems are delivered becomes more workload specific. But you can get 50 to 100% if you embrace the modern way of scale-out operations. And so this is the area that I think is super, super interesting for enterprises engaging with OCP. And the reason companies tend to adopt Ubuntu and partner with Canonical is because this is our prime focus. This is, we're very passionate about bringing this new era of scale-out operations to industry at large. It's a really good fit for OCP. So how can you do that as an enterprise? Well, one way is SaaS. If you move essentially a part of your operation and you outsource it to a SaaS provider that is operating in this modern way, then you can expect, obviously, to get the benefits of those more efficient operations. And that's a very good option in many cases. A lot of the new SaaS providers are doing things right. They're on Ubuntu. They are working, they've architected their applications as scale-out applications. They're very, very lean administrative overhead. And if you become a customer of theirs, obviously, then you gain those benefits. But you sacrifice perhaps the key asset in business today, which is your data, to a third party. The other approach is to embrace the new operational approach and to get those efficiencies for yourself in your own operation with your own team. And that's really about smarter automation. So let me give you a little taste of what that looks like. Again, on this box, what do we have up? So still coming, Windows on the one hand, CentOS on the other. So we know we can install operating systems, but what if we could go straight to applications? So the little lights on the front of this box here are individual servers, essentially. So as lights come on, that's machines being deployed. So say I want to say, let's go create a blog. I'm just going to say I want MySQL. That looks good to me. And I'll go for WordPress. That also looks good to me. And I'm going to just link those because a blog needs a database, and we're off to the races. So I've now come up a level, and instead of looking at the metal, and instead of looking at operating systems, I'm looking at the workload. I'm looking at the service. And I don't really know anything about WordPress. I know something about MySQL, but I've never really got into WordPress, but I've just deployed it. And you'll see 2 more machines in the data center turn on. I've been allocated that quota of resources. And so now, without me having to be an operator or an administrator, I'm effectively getting the benefit of those services. Okay, so that's a blog, fine. But what about scale? What about the really interesting scale-out stuff? So what I want to show you today is the bare metal trifecta. These are 3 huge, important pieces of infrastructure that every large business is going to build for themselves. And so I want to show you how, over the course of the rest of this talk, just in another 15 minutes, we will spin up all three of those on the remaining orange boxes. So again, you've taken delivery of another couple of OCP racks, and you are spinning up these really important big scale-out services on those racks. So I'm going to go over to this orange box over here. And on this orange box, I'm going to put a bit of big data. So I went, this over here, this you can search here in this orchestration system. You can search for whatever you want. So I'm going to search for Hadoop. And this, that's not what I want. That's what I want. So I've just deployed 4 services, and those will give me not just Hadoop, but Hive and MySQL, which will use as front ends to my big data story. And I'm going to go, I really like this thing called Elasticsearch. If you haven't played with it, it's amazing. And I think it's this one over here. And so over the course, again, of the next 5 to 10 minutes, you'll see lights coming on this rack over here, and operating systems being installed. I don't know which operating system. It could be Windows, it could be CentOS, it could be RHEL. I don't need to know, right? What I need to know is that the services will be made available to me, and without me having people assigned to doing operations and administration, I can trust that to spin up and in a larger deployment, stay highly available, stay highly efficient, and just work. And so those will come up. When it's up, it'll look like this. This is that same set of services spun up on EC2. Exactly the same experience with this orchestration tool, Juju. Just drag what you want onto the canvas, connect it up, and off you go. Since those services are live, I'm going to do some integration, some live integration, right? I've got Hive set up, and I'm going to connect it to Elasticsearch and commit those changes. And now on those virtual machines on EC2, I can do it on the bare metal as well. Various pieces are run to do dynamic real-time integration of those components. So now I've got Elasticsearch, which is this awesome kind of front end to all sorts of big data. And I've got a big data store in the form of Yarn and HDFS and Hive. Okay, so that was that one. What about OpenStack? So I'm going to do OpenStack slightly differently. Imagine that you want to use a particular version of OpenStack that your associate had certified. Well, they might have emailed you essentially a little textual description of that cloud. And so now what you can do is go and drag that out of your email and drop it onto the same GUI. And now on this cluster over here, again, you should see lights coming on in the rack, and operating systems being installed. The flashing lights would be disk activity, and then all of the components of OpenStack getting deployed. Now, there are something like 20 of those components spread across maybe 7 machines. So this would take an enormous amount of administrative time if you were doing it the old-fashioned way. But again, the key here is to get away from administrators and focus on your developers. In these great businesses, the Dropboxes, the Airbnbs, the WhatsApps, they concentrate the majority of their human capital on innovation, invention, product development, product design. And so they have this huge advantage over businesses that are essentially slowed down by traditional operations. So those are all coming up, and you see the services coming up as machines are deployed. And then, just because it takes a little bit longer, and I wanted to show you what it looks like when it's running, on this box over here we have Cloud Foundry, which is one of the more industrial strength open source PaaS platforms. We think the leading PaaS platform today. And so, again, that is up and running. Oh, look what we have here. Windows. I always find that sort of very exotic to see Windows kicked off like that. So there's Cloud Foundry up and running. That's what it looks like. Again, this is what it looks like on the cloud. So again, the same experience for bare metal as for cloud. A lot of the lessons from cloud now coming back to the bare metal world. Now, to wrap up this section, I know some of you guys are thinking, okay, great, that's nice, these little Intel microservers, but what about the OCP good stuff, the big tin? So I'm delighted to teleport you over to Texas. And here we have Maz running at the University of Texas in San Antonio. And in the lab there, which some of you may know is a big center for OCP research and leadership, they have Maz set up looking at a cluster of 76 machines, many of which are OCP, some of which are not OCP. And what we're going to do is deploy an OpenStack cloud on that cluster. Now, I'm not going to do the same sort of low-level orchestration thing of just putting all the workloads in a bundle on those machines. I'm actually going to use an even higher-level tool, a tool that we announced this week, which is an autopilot for OpenStack. So this is a tool which will let me build a cloud, and I don't need to know anything about all the various services that go into that cloud. All I'm going to do is say, okay, let's go build a cloud. We can call it region, call it San Antonio in Cloud, Texas. Why not? Or U, Texas. And I need to make some choices. So I'm going to use KVM and Open vSwitch, which are our standard things. These two pieces of software, Maz knows about all the networks, knows about all the IP addresses, so this autopilot is able to query that. I don't have to actually know any information. It pre-populates everything. I might have to choose between networks. In this case, there's only the one. And storage, this cloud will let me do storage in different ways, so I can choose Swift or Ceph. Have you guys heard of that? Any preferences, Swift or Ceph? 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 Love Ceph. There we go. And I can do Ceph, obviously, for block and object. And now I get to choose hardware. So what's happened is that the hardware in Maz is being queried remotely, and I can just basically check boxes to say, yep, these are all the machines I want to put into that OpenStack cloud. And it tells me a little bit about which machines are useful for various services, whether they're on the public network, whether they have enough network cards to be SDN gateways and things like that. But at the end of the day, all I'm going to do is say, yep, use all of the hardware. That's 856 cores, 5.5 terabytes of RAM, 90 terabytes of disk, and off we go. So over the course of some time, that autopilot will inspect the hardware, decide which services to place on which machines based on network connectivity and an assessment of the hardware capabilities. It'll build a highly available cloud, and then it will monitor it, manage it, keep it highly available. If I want to scale it up, scale it down, it will handle all of those processes. Now, this is the new era, in my view, of operations. This is how today's enterprises are going to transform themselves to get the efficiencies that we see in the mega data center operators, the Facebooks, the Googles, and the Microsofts. Right. I have one last thing to show you, which is this. Everything I showed you today works across x86 and ARM and Power. And to prove that, here is the first generation of 64-bit ARM server chips. These are from Applied Micro, and that is a cluster of, I think, 8 of the development boards, the X-Gene development boards from Applied Micro. And I think if OCP is to be the forum for the future of platforms, then it needs to have full representation and support for all of the options that industry and enterprise are going to seek out. So I'm delighted that everything that we do will work across all of those 3 important architectures. So what have we covered? Well, I think that the most important thing is to think about agility, right? OCP, the focus is very much on hardware, but it's also important to think about the agility with which one consumes that hardware, the agility with which one turns that metal into an asset, into a working resource, into a store of data, into a processing engine, into a place to go looking for answers. Another metric that is really important is not just the time to value. If you've got $10 million worth of hardware sitting in a room for a month to get it commissioned and set up, that's a month. That's a very expensive month. If you can get it up and running and commissioned in minutes, that's obviously a much more valuable month to you. But I think what's really interesting is not just the time to value, but the time to repeat. Those of you who follow the space industry will remember perhaps that the X Prize for spaceflight was not given to the first private company to launch a private vehicle into space. It was given to the first company that could launch a private vehicle into space, bring it back, and then launch it back into space within 2 weeks. The emphasis was very much on that ability to repeat. And we see exactly the same thing in operations today. The ability to spin stuff up and then do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again is where you get your ability to learn faster, to grow faster. Iteration is the secret to rapid development. It gives you so much confidence that you know you can always recreate something automatically. It gives you the confidence to change it much more aggressively, much more dynamically, at a much faster pace. So the time to repeat is just as important as the time to value. So that's what I had for enterprises. For solution providers, for vendors, I hope what you saw today is a taste of how you could be moving into the solution space. The various pieces that got dragged and dropped onto that Juju canvas belong to whoever created them. And we see several of the OCP vendors now starting to create their own solutions that they can deliver. And I'd be very happy to discuss that with folks who are here, who are part of OCP, and who are interested in moving up the stack and being able to offer tailored solutions for vertical markets or particular applications. Thank you very much. I hope that was useful and interesting. It is a pleasure to be here. And I'm here all day, as are other folks from Ubuntu and Canonical. If you want to coordinate a meeting, easiest is just to email me. I'm mark@ubuntu.com. And for one day only, I will look at email. And I look forward to hearing from you and to meeting some of you guys socially over the course of the day. Thank you very much.